Hello, Ambassador Raghavan, am I good?
Good morning, General Saab. Yes, you're audible, although there's a faint garbling. But please continue. Maybe we'll be able to, it'll improve as we go along.
Jan Lodi, can you hear me?
General Saab, good morning. I can hear you. I can understand.
Mr. Basit?
Not very clear, but okay.
I can hear you, Ji. No issue. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you well. We've been using this system for quite some time, but it appears to be one of those odd days. Nevertheless, very good. Air Marshal Bagle, who is the Chief of Defense Staff, our council members, our colleagues from the other three ranks, and officers from the three services, as also a large number of our members who are digitally connected with us. I'm especially thankful to General Lodi.
आवाज आना बंद हो गई है.
We can't hear you. Zahid?
What about now?
आवाज.
Ambassador Raghavan, you can hear?
It's better now, yes.
And what about Ambassador Basit?
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's better. It's better.
ये आवाज आ रही है आपकी. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I am so sorry for all these glitches. So, as we know that Pakistan has made its national security policy document public with fanfare, and it is supposed to be an umbrella policy document that contains Pakistan's vision, its strategic goals, and policy guidelines to steer the strategic destiny of Pakistan into a self-respecting, sovereign, and inclusive state with focus on comprehensive national security. Now, there has been a lot of debate on the tone and tenor of this document, and a lot of articles have been written. There are opinions that it is a wishful thinking, laced with platitudes, and camouflaged in Western jargon, and it is essentially a handiwork of Western influenced writers who are not steeped in the ground realities of Pakistan. And there is also an opinion which necessarily may not be true, that it is manufactured by the military establishment and presented with a civilian government facade. In India, a vast majority have shrugged off the document, saying that it does not reflect any change in Pakistan's thinking, as the document reflects utter disdain for India. This impression is reinforced by
फिर आवाज रुक गई है. Can't hear you. आवाज नहीं आ रही. जी Jan Saab can't hear you.
General Saab, you're not audible anymore.
वो उनको पता नहीं चला कि हमें आवाज नहीं आ रही, वो तो
वो लगे हुए हैं।
जी
Am I the only one who can't hear?
None of us. But perhaps he doesn't know that we are not hearing.
I'm sure he knows. I'm
अब
sure he
पता
knows.
चल अब पता चल गया उनको.
Okay,
I think he's going to do it on a phone now.
maybe. How are you, Mr. Ambassador Agavan? All is
How are
well?
you? Nice to see you, Basit Saab.
Same here, sir. Same here. Very kind of you.
Johnny.
Thing doing?
Why it's locked? There's something which is locked here. Am I audible, sir? Am I audible, sir?
Yes,
Yes,
now
yes.
Disturbed है थोड़ी सी आवाज, but we can understand.
Right, right. So
Last 2-3 minutes we could not hear you. Initial remarks we have picked up.
yeah. So am I better now?
Yes.
Yes. Janodi?
जी जी आ रही जी आवाज आपकी, ठीक है, थैंक यू.
Okay. So I would say that when Pakistan has made its national security policy public with fanfare, and it's supposed to be an umbrella document that contains Pakistan's vision, strategic goals, and policy guidelines to steer the strategic destiny of Pakistan into a self-respecting, sovereign, and inclusive state with added focus on comprehensive national security. There are different shades of opinion on the tone and tenor of this document. Some people call it a wishful thinking, laced with latitude and camouflage in the Western jargon. And people feel that it's a handiwork of Western influenced writers who are not steeped or rooted in the ground realities of Pakistan. There are others who adore the document that at least the first time any country in South Asia has made such an attempt. In India, vast majority have shrugged off the document, saying that it does not reflect any change in Pakistan's thinking as far as India is concerned. And this impression to an extent is reinforced by the recent statements made by Prime Minister Imran Khan on 5th of September and subsequently during his interaction with President Xi Jinping. There is also a view that the geopolitical and strategic realities which indicate that India should be central to comprehensive national security of India, of Pakistan, and its very economic rejuvenation has somehow been given a very, very peripheral approach. In India, Professor Sanjay Baru, who is part of this panel today, he wrote a very nice article in Deccan Herald in which, and I quote, he said, Indian readers, it should be clear to both the document's authors and its readers that Pakistan cannot operationalize its proposed geo-economic pivot without establishing stable and good relations with India. For this reason, the national security paper should be viewed as an indication of new thinking in Pakistan on relations with India and not dismissed as old wine in new bottles, as some in India have done. The moot point, however, is whether this document reflects a realization in Pakistan to break out from a status trap, or it generally seeks a new trajectory of change. Now, will that urge for change be sustainable without mending relations with India, which remains central to Pakistan's security calculus? So basically, the purpose of today's discussion is not to sort of get into a blame game and look at the whole issue in a very nuanced, in a very, very detached, dispassionate manner, discuss the very timings of this document, its ownership, tone, tenor, coherence, contradictions, and perceptions across different sections of audience in Pakistan as well as in India. And also a very important point is the very feasibility of implementation of this document. We would also make an attempt to guess what would be contained in the classified portion of the document, taking some pointers from the contours which have been spelled out in the open document. I'm very sure that given the credentials of eminent panelists here, our discussion will be sans the rhetoric, blame game, and remain objective in all its content and be forward-looking despite inevitable divergences in respective perceptions and opinions. So with these words, may I now request Dr. Sanjay Baru, who needs no introduction, but I would say that, well, briefly, he has been our distinguished fellow at the USI, his honorary senior fellow for Center for Policy Research, as also a consulting fellow at the International Institute of Strategic Studies, London. He has been advisor to Prime Minister on media issues and been chief editor of number of prestigious papers in India. Is also member of has been member of National Security Advisory Board and on the Committee of India National Defense Committee and India ASEAN Eminent Personnel Group. He has very wide-ranging, teaching assignments in India and abroad, and has authored a large number of widely read books in India. So with these four words, I now request Professor Sanjay Baru to give us the major takeaways from this talk. Use that mic or use this. Thank you very much, General Sharma. Raghavan, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
First of all, let me compliment USI for organizing this discussion. As General Sharma has mentioned, there's been some discussion and analysis of this document in the media, but I don't think any other think tank in Delhi has so far organized a serious discussion around it. And a lot of the commentary in the media has been quite dismissive and superficial. We have had a couple of very good articles by both Mr. T.C. Raghavan and Sharad Sabharwal, both of whom were former High Commissioners in Islamabad. I will not speak about the military dimensions of the national security policy. We have General Bhatia here. I will also not speak on the kind of foreign policy issues arising out of this, because Raghavan will speak about that. Let me confine myself, one, to the document, to what I see as the key issues in the document. And secondly, to an area of my own expertise, which is geoeconomics, and looking at this document from a very different perspective to that of several analysts. First and foremost, I think whenever one comes across a document like this coming out of a government, and it's not often that governments make public their thinking on some of these issues, I think one must look at both the text and the context. Both are relevant. And I think a lot of the commentary so far has been on the text without adequate appreciation of the context. So what I will do is also to look at what I believe may be the context. The text itself is interesting, and while that in India the focus has been on what the document says about India, India doesn't figure in the first half of the document. If I were to read this text as a non-Indian, I would look at the first 2 or 3 chapters from a very different perspective than I would look at it if I were an Indian reading, because I think the Indians tend, or rather we in South Asia, tend to look each other from our own prisms rather than from a third point of view. The opening statement in the very preface says, cognizant of Pakistan's complex security requirements, the national security policy adopts a directional tone, providing strategic guidance on priority areas, policy action, while identifying opportunities for and challenges to our national security in the medium and long term. The policy conveys a clear and bold vision, emphasizing a geo-economic paradigm that supplements our geostrategic approach, laying down a broad roadmap on how to actualize the chosen path. It is not relevant for me as a reader whether this reflects the thinking of a westernized elite in Pakistan, or whether it reflects the thinking of the military in Pakistan or the political leadership in Pakistan, because I will look at it as a document that has been authorized by the government of Pakistan. Now, we will listen to our Pakistani colleagues to see how they would look at it. And Najam Sethi, a very distinguished journalist, in fact, dismissed the whole thing as a undergraduate term paper and not worthy of much taking very seriously. But I think there is an interesting focus here in this document on what I, given my limited understanding of Pakistan's economy, etc., believe to be the real crisis facing Pakistan, which is an economic crisis. And it is an enduring economic crisis. And if I read through large parts of the document, it is really aimed at suggesting to its own people
that the crisis that Pakistan faces is less geopolitical and more geoeconomic. To quote a couple of paragraphs at some length, Pakistan is navigating myriad national security challenges amidst the changing world order. The nation's resolute response to internal and external threats has helped Pakistan overcome many of these challenges in the recent past. However, during this period, traditional security imperatives have been compounded by emerging non-traditional security challenges. Terrorism and growing conventional force differential in the region have heightened threat perceptions. Equally, economic vulnerability, deficits in public service delivery for a growing population, natural disasters, and a pandemic have demonstrated that Pakistan's national security is increasingly predicated on all aspects of governance that impact the lives of citizens. A holistic understanding of national security, one that encapsulates the entire spectrum of comprehensive national security, is necessary to create sustainable solutions. Pakistan's vital national security interests are being best served by placing economic security at the core of national security. Now, I know for hardcore analysts of power and strategy, for diplomats and military analysts, this may not appear as a core issue. But for an economist like me and for someone who's worked on geoeconomics, I have always believed that this is the core problem in South Asia, our economic backwardness. That almost all our security challenges have long argued derive from this backwardness. And for a long time, I've been arguing in various platforms, including 20 years ago when I was member of the National Security Advisory, that for us, the biggest challenge is an economic challenge, namely China, and not a military challenge. That the geoeconomic rise of China, as a geoeconomic power, constitutes India's major challenge. And if I were a Pakistani, I would say the biggest challenge for Pakistan, in fact, has also been the geoeconomic rise of India. It's not the military rise of India or the military power of India that challenges Pakistan in the region as much as our geoeconomic rise. And the China-Pakistan axis, in many ways, in my judgment, has been aimed at curtailing India's geoeconomic rise. It's really preventing this economic rise of India. That is the game in the region. And therefore, when Pakistani strategist looks at economic security as the core of national security, at least for me, this is music, because I argue that finally they are addressing the real issue. That they are not really looking at Kashmir. Of course, Kashmir is mentioned, and any such document will have to mention Kashmir. You can't expect a document coming out of Pakistan without reference to Kashmir. But that's not the focus of the document. And I think we in India should understand what is the focus of the document. Very interesting. The first challenge that is identified with the national security policy is Pakistan's identity and culture. I was quite amazed to see that what are we as a nation? And go back into the history of Pakistan, this has always been an existential issue. When I've argued, many have argued Pakistan was a geographical entity with an Islamic identity. It was carved out, it's an artificial construct as a nation. Unlike many other nations in Asia, it does not have a sui generis identity. Therefore, for the document to say that the first challenge is its identity and culture, is recognizing a domestic, political, cultural, social crisis of Pakistan is at the core of today's development problem in Pakistan. The second challenge it addresses is socio-economic inequality. And that's so staring us in our face across the region. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all of South Asia is dealing with problems of socio-economic inequality. And third, governance and institutional capacity. Now, any document to me that begins by identifying these three as the principal challenges and comes to the problem of the regional geopolitics, only in the last chapter, to me, I would take that seriously, because from my point of view, as an economist, as someone who has looked at India's national security now for some time, I do believe that It's the economic crisis that is at the core of our national security problem. Then it identifies three policy objectives. The first policy objective is preserving the identity of Pakistan. I would like to listen to my other panelists to explain how they see that as an issue. Second policy objective, to ensure the unity and stability of Pakistan. I mean, internal challenges, Balochistan and the other regions, these are all mentioned. Terrorism at home. So ensuring unity and stability at home. And finally, making the government responsive, making public service responsive. Now, these could all be identified as India's major national security challenges too. Each of us in the region face similar ones. But finally, and I'll end with this remark, which is that the policy focus, after having said all of this, when the document comes to policy objectives or policy focus, the principal policy focus is economic policy. Reducing external imbalance, reducing inequalities, vertical inequalities that's called, which is class, and horizontal inequalities, which is regional. Recognizing these, and that economic development should aim at these three objectives of reducing external imbalance, reducing vertical inequalities, and horizontal inequalities. And then there's an extensive discussion of the policies required. Just to quote one more passage, this imbalance, which is the external imbalance, and this is interesting, I'll explain why I think it's interesting. This imbalance emanates from consistently higher foreign exchange outflows as compared to inflows. In order to exercise the full spectrum of sovereign choice in both domestic development objectives and international affairs, addressing the issue of external imbalance is essential. The long-term sustainability depends in large part on Pakistan's ability to correct its current account deficit. This will primarily be achieved through a dedicated focus on export growth and export-oriented foreign direct investment, enabled by ease of doing business as increasing foreign remittances. Equally ensuring a management fiscal deficit through a consistent increase in government revenues requires continued focus on tax reforms. There's an enormous emphasis on the role of foreign remittances, the role of the Pakistani diaspora in West Asia, the need to increase exports, and the need to increase human exports and bring in remittances. So the external economic crisis gets a lot of attention. And that is what brings me to the context of the document. The context of the document is twofold. First and foremost, Pakistan positioned itself as a geostrategic entity in this region in the context of the Cold War. They defined itself in terms of its relationship first with the United States and then its relationship with China, which have remained its principal guarantors of security, economic as well as military security. And they continue to remain so. But with the retreat of the United States from the region, after its retreat from Afghanistan, there is a certain change geopolitical context in which Pakistan's geopolitical relevance has gone down. We are now in a situation where major powers are asserting themselves, whether it is China, Russia, Iran, India, and the United States itself. The geopolitical relevance, and I'm not an expert in this region, but to the extent that I'm aware of what's happening, I don't think Pakistan today has the same geopolitical relevance for the region as it had during the Cold War. And therefore, this document extensively discusses the need to shift from geostrategic paradigm to a geoeconomic paradigm. As Pakistan supplements its, and I'm quoting, as Pakistan supplements its geostrategic focus with an added emphasis on geoeconomics, it envisions itself as a melting pot of global economic interests, offering economic basis to its partners. So it's no longer military basis, but economic basis to its partner countries for development partnership. A dedicated economic outreach initiative focuses on bilateral and multilateral engagement with the aim of increasing Pakistan's exports, especially by widening our export base to include services and non-traditional goods, building win-win relationships in trade and investment. Pakistan's prized geoeconomic location provides a unique opportunity to for north-south and east-west connectivity to South and Central Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And this is where I say what General Sharma quoted from my column, which is that this geoeconomic connectivity that Pakistan sees as its future between east, west, north, south can only be realized if relations with the entire group. Pakistan cannot be the geoeconomic center of the region, linking Asia across northwest and east-west without improving relations with India. And therefore, that is where I say the, 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 the fruition of this strategy requires a change in its attitude towards India, and we'll have to wait and see if that happens. Finally, let me, in passing, also refer to a second context. This document was made public in the run-up to the negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for a renewal of its $6 billion extended fund facility. Out of the $6 billion, Pakistan was able to get probably $1 billion or more now, and the facility itself is frozen. Pakistan has been facing problems in the Financial Action Task Force, and the IMF board took its time to approve a further loan. Finally, 4 days ago, IMF approved its loan. $1 billion have been approved. And I have had some understanding of the way in which IMF negotiations go on. I've studied India's own negotiations in the past and how these things happen. And I will not be surprised that a large part of this focus on geoeconomics, on internal inequalities, on reducing debt, on external balancing, on fiscal reform, on increasing petrol prices, on adjusting the exchange rate, on monetary policy reform, all of which are listed in the document. Which, if I read out to you, I don't have time, I won't take time, but maybe in the discussion I can. I read out to you the IMF memorandum authorizing the $1 billion thing. This on the internet, you can see the full text. If you read the resolution of the IMF Executive Board, almost all these are mentioned as policies that Pakistan will undertake in order to qualify for the loan. So in some ways, I think we have a signal from Pakistan that says, I want to address my economic problems. I want to address my internal problems. Help me, United States, help me, China, so that we can focus there. And I will end by saying that the way I read this document, India is not central to the strategy. But others may disagree with me, and I'm quite open to.
Thank you very much, Professor Baru, for raising some very, very pertinent issues for our discussion. And as said, that if you look at the overall strategic security calculus of Pakistan, India is central to that, and the document does talk about enhanced, heightened hybrid security threat. But this ambition of Pakistan's economic rejuvenation actually fructify if India is not on board, which has the largest consumer market and a very robust economy next. So I now request General Naim Khalid Lodi to give his introductory remarks and maybe some response to what Professor Baru said. And we are very, very happy to have him here with us. He's a separate officer who commanded a corps, and he's also had very, very illustrious appointments at different levels, command, operational, staff, and instructional, and been on faculty of all of the premium training establishments of Pakistan. He's been educated in US, France, besides being the defense secretary, the interim defense minister. He's also been a CEO and managing director of a leading corporate organization in his country. And he's a very popular speaker. I've been listening to his articulations at different fora. So I think he's a very, very rational human being, a very, very rational senior officer. So over to you, General Lodi. Let's have your initial remarks.
Thank you very much, General Sharma. In fact, after saying what you have said about me, you have made my task difficult. People must be expecting a lot from me, whereas I'm just a. Thank you very much, USI and Excellencies, Generals, Admirals, Marshals, and it was really good to listen to Professor Sanjay, to listen to his understanding of national security policy of Pakistan. Of course, I will try to clarify one or two things which he has said. First of all, I think talking is good. You must have noticed that as we started our talk, your mics have started behaving, and now we can listen to you very clearly. So, as one of the poets said, that दिलों की उलझनें बढ़ती रहेंगी अगर कुछ मशवरे बाहम ना होंगे. So basically, if we want to remove any mistrust and remove any misgiving, the first condition is to talk, and I'm very happy that we are doing that. Let me also share one grief that we also share with you, and that is the demise of Lata Mangeshkar. She was a great singer and very popular in our country also, and we also feel very sad that she has left us. Ladies and gentlemen, once we talk about national security policy, because I am talking to a very well aware audience, we understand very well that it is an apex document that provides only broad framework and general guidance to the downstream policies. In fact, once I had to do something with this, I was even inclined to remove the word security. I said that let us call it national policy document. Because the people who are not well aware of the expanded meaning of security, I'm talking about the general public. The moment you put in the word security, they think we are talking about tanks and guns and all that. Unfortunately, uh, so we in our constitution we have, as all the most of the constitutions do have, as far as the purpose of national purpose and national interest. Some of the national interests are fixed there also, and other national interests, they keep on changing at times. So I would say that this national security comprehensive national security paper is a sort of bridge between the national interests and the downstream policies, like defense policy and economic policy and internal policies and all that. So this is how we see this document. So it cannot go into specifics and deep into how to do the things and all that. And I think we all know that. And one supreme national interest of, I think, all the countries, or nearly all the countries, is the welfare and protection of the people. And welfare, I think, gets precedence. So it is good that at least we have a document where it stipulates and lays down the people in the center. Now, it is not that Pakistan was being run without any policy. Naturally, it was not possible. All the downstream policies were there: economic policies, foreign policy, defense policies, and others also. Although this written form, of course, we have the apex policy paper or apex policy now with us. But I am also aware, and I must inform the audience, that the preparation of this policy, apex policy, took some time. Although it is normal that any political government will try to take the credit once the document is ready, and because they are the ones who actually issued it, so the credit goes to them. But this procedure started quite some time back, at least a decade ago, as far as I understand. And there are inputs of all the institutions, and I think nearly all the political parties. So once the political parties say that it has not been discussed with us, I think that has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Now, as far as the contents are concerned, and Professor Saab has talked about it a lot, uh, the main, I think, thing which has been emphasized, not that it was not there earlier, but this that has been emphasized, is that it is people centric. It is for the welfare of the people of Pakistan. and I think that is the right thing to do. But once it talks about the eminence of geoeconomics, it does indicate, and I think all of us, we understand, those of us here, that geoeconomics cannot be separated from geopolitics or geostrategy. I mean, if you do not have good relations with countries, which is geopolitics, how can you have geoeconomics? I mean, how can you have good economy? So these relationships, and on what basis those relationships will be nurtured, which is basically geopolitics. Without that, you cannot have good economy. So it just emphasizes a lot on geoeconomy, and rightly so. But I think we understand, and I think the drafters of this policy also understand that it cannot be separated from geopolitics. Uh, it seeks peace with neighbors. And once we talk of seeking peace with neighbors, whether we say it or not, it is very well understood that India stands out number one. What Professor Saab was saying, that India does not, seem to be the center of this policy. I think it's not like that. Once we say who's the largest neighbor of Pakistan, and who's the neighbor which affects most as far as our security is concerned, and as far as other things are concerned. So India has, we have that thing in mind. So especially saying that we now seek peace with neighbors, I think maybe you find a bit of shift, and shifts always take in incremental steps. Your especially we have many excellencies over here from both sides. We do understand that foreign policies of countries cannot change overnight. You have, it is just like a Titanic moving in sea, and you have to take a big round turn to really make it happen. So I think it should be appreciated as a first step, that although we have been talking about peace all along, and we have been saying that it is not because of us that the area is not peaceful, but we can discuss that later on. It talks about connectivity, and rightly so. Without connection with India, connectivity would only be partial. North south is just one direction, unless we have east west connectivity also. So that also indicates that we have that thing in mind, that the connectivity all around is required. Uh, it does talk about as far the expanded meaning of security is concerned, talks about food autarky, food security, water security, even environment, and other. And we all understand that environment nowadays, how it impinges on the welfare of the people, welfare of the regions. Yes, it talks about internal cohesion, and I think Professor Saab talked about it, Professor Sanjay, and rightly so. We are reviewing, I think, as per our policy, but the first thing we should all remember that once Basit Saab speaks, or I am speaking on this policy, we are not trying to advocate this policy, and we are not necessarily totally agreeing with all aspects of this policy. But naturally, we will not bring out those are internal whatever we keep telling them. But I'm just going through what I've understood from the policy so far. So internal cohesion is for us and for everybody, and for India also. You all understand, and we understand, a very important aspect which has been mentioned. The way how this internal cohesion will manifest, how it will be created, that is beside the point. That is a different discussion altogether. We have also talked, I think, somewhere that this once talking about conventional security, the hybridity of the threat, and how it needs to be countered. I think this is very important. As a general, I would say that the nature, we used to say that the character of war is changing. Actually, the nature of war has also changed. So accordingly, we need to find out the solution. So I would say that being a broad-based framework, it is not very specific, and it is yet to be seen that how it gets manifested, because in countries like us, like ours, coming out with philosophies, coming out with policies is not very difficult, but actually implementing them, getting, if we call it an umbrella policy, which it is, to ensure that all the downstream policies are aligned accordingly in the same direction. That is not a small job. Yes, it does not lay down the implementation mechanism, which is most important, and I think it is not within the mandate of the apex policy to do that. But your implementation prowess with the whatever the existing implementation power, it can only be that much. It will also depend on the monitoring and feedback mechanism and corrective measures taken, because as I think NSA said himself, that he's ready to accommodate if there are any views on that. So I would say that a sudden change. I agree with the colleagues who've written in India also, that a sudden change in foreign policy and defense policy and other policies should not be expected. But I think a step has been taken, the first step, which is necessary, and it does indicate some changes in the attitude, some changes in the thinking, and I think that should be appreciated. Uh, as far as Professor Sanjay's remarks are concerned, I think he has understood most part of it correctly. One thing I've already answered, that he said that India does not appear to be very important in that policy. The name India may not be there, but by just saying that we want connectivity, and by just saying that we want peace all around, and by saying that geoeconomics will take the lead, I think there are good indicators that we are talking about India, and we are talking about it quite openly. As far the relevance of Pakistan, whether its geopolitical relevance has faded away or it is not there, that is yet to be seen, and you'll see it very soon. Because if such a great power, China, is just next door, and they are interested in Afghanistan, and they are interested in Gwadar, I don't know how can America leave it to Russia and China, this entire region, as far as Iran is concerned, and Pakistan is concerned. And if India is geopolitically relevant to America, be sure, gentlemen, Pakistan will remain very relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Lodi, for those remarks. And while it may not have been there in the document, but you have alluded to strategic importance of India for the growth story, and also reflected on that this geo-connectivity, north, south, east, west connectivity, it will remain incomplete if India is not on board. And you have also alluded to certain security aspects. Maybe during question answer section, we would dilate more on these subjects. Now, I request General Arvind Bhatia to speak on anything that he wishes to be particularly focused on the security dimensions of this policy. And he is a third generation military officer, done all the prestigious courses in India. He has had 3 foreign assignments, which included being in the training team in Bhutan. Then he's been a deputy brigade commander in Congo. And after his National Defense College and stint in the Perspective Planning Directorate, he was a defense military advisor in Pakistan. So I think he has lived there, he is interacted with your military, and probably may have a better insight into the thinking. So with these words, may I now request Jan Bhatia to give his initial remarks.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, audience, and thank you, panelists. It's been a distinct honor to be sitting here, say, found scholars and eminent people who know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to our immediate western neighbor, Pakistan. Uh, Let me first give a few points through the 48-page document to 8 parts. That is the open document. It has eight subparts, and in eight subparts, there are three parts which talk of security, but one is the territorial.
Voice is not clear. We can't hear him properly.
Am I on the cloud, sir?
It's not very clear.
वो जनरल शर्मा की आवाज अच्छी आ रही थी, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही।
There is no.
नहीं। नहीं, आवाज नहीं आ रही। नहीं सर।
We can't hear.
On a mobile. Hello.
तो अनम्यूट सकते हैं तो मोबाइल को अनम्यूट हुआ just a minute. The solution is only
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, so you will be okay.
Is this better, sir? Am I audible now, sir?
This
Yes.
is better. There's an echo which is coming. Echo of your sound. Otherwise,
You switch this off. No.
Sir, is the echo down, sir?
जी अभी ठीक है।
Roger, sir. Roger. I see thumbs up, sir. So before I go into another uncalled for disruption, I'll continue. So let's start with some positives. As an infantry officer, when I go through the document, there are certain positives which I want to just highlight. First is the promulgation itself, that a document has come out after 15 years of exercise, internal exercise itself is a big positive. Secondly, when I go through a lot of documents which I went through in Islamabad, I found a distinct American kind of a English used, while this is more readable and easy to comprehend than the documents which had a distinct Western flavor, which were earlier promulgated by Pakistan. So that also comes out as a positive. Of course, it is aspirational, it is concise. Whether it is aligned to reality on ground, that's a moot question. That would be one of the negatives. So definitely it is aspirational. It shows the way as to what Pakistan should follow and aspire to be. It is also somewhat inward looking. And I'm told that for the first time in almost 30 years, an attempt has been made to look inwards, look within. What are the woes which Pakistan faces, ground realities? An attempt has been made, whether it is the economics, whether it is the connectivity, whether it is the internal security situation, whether it is the other kind of geopolitics and the kind of relations with the neighbors is concerned. It also conveys a hurt and angst towards the West. And when I talk of the West, of course, it conveys the angst towards USA primarily, and also the other, I would say, institutions related to the West, be it the IMF, the World Bank, the various other things. And that is why there's a distinct flavor. And of course, as we talk, we are told that the $3 billion loan from China is through because Imran Khan is presently in Beijing. Of course, it also identifies its economic and internal security woes, and Kashmir merits only about 113 words. So, Kashmir is not the distinct flavor of this, while in the context, India is in each paragraph. It may not be there directly, but indirectly, India or its ideology or its policies or perceived policies or its presence is very much felt in this document. And I'm sure that it would be occupying much more space in the hidden portion or the confidential portions. Now, when we just list out a few negatives, I don't feel that it is based on reality on ground. And the aspirational and the reality, ground reality mismatch is very evident. The anti India stance is latent, but it is very distinct. There are a lot of factual flaws when it concerns the immediate kind of neighborhood. And there seems to be kind of a delusional kind of a mindset. And sometimes that policy, as part of the state policy, that running with the hare and hunting with the hounds comes out loud and clear. That you are not very clear. You are blaming the other person for the woes or for the machinations which you have got onto yourself. Certainly, General Lodi sir also mentioned that the institutions or the instruments who are going to implement this policy are not there. So, of course, this is an aspirational document. This is the apex document. Doesn't need to give out the roadmap, but definitely it needs to highlight the institutions. It only talks of the NSC. It talks of the NSA and its office, which is going to implement this. I think they will not be able to tackle the implementation part of this policy. It, of course, though General Lodi did mention that it will be taken with a pinch of salt, that the other political parties, the other players were not taken into confidence while uh, promulgating or making this policy. So I would take it that maybe the it was not all inclusive and not really the kind of holistic document which should have otherwise come out. Uh, so with this negative, let me highlight a few points which I came which are the main points of the subparts which I talked of. When I talk of the subparts of the territorial defense and territorial integrity, it talked of a policy of pursuing open and secure borders. Now, this is one nation which has no open and secure borders. 90% of the Durand line they have now fenced. 100% of the line of control, less the AGPL, the line of control and the IB is fenced, and almost 35 to 40% of the border with Iran has already been fenced, and otherwise there's a kind of a ditch cum band, which is a kind of a obstacle which is between, and it is otherwise part of Sistan, Baluchistan, a desert kind of a region. So, though it talks of a open and secure borders, but on ground there is nothing open and there is nothing secure about it. We've read about what Taliban did while destroying the fence, though it will remain in the tactical domain, but this kind of pinpricks will continue to happen because of the quest for Greater Pakhtunkhwa. It talks of expanding the maritime surveillance and aviation security protocols. It talks of this all right, but on ground there is nothing which is in the horizon also, which is going to assist them in the maritime surveillance and aviation security assets. It talks of special attention to lingering border disputes along the LC and the working boundary. Of course, they call it a working boundary. We don't call it a working boundary. It talks of conventional military threats, and it says they are aggressive and dangerous ideologies gripping the collective conscience in the immediate neighborhood. Now we know who's the immediate neighborhood which they are talking of. So they're not talking of their own policies, they're talking of the conventional threats which are gripping the eastern, the larger neighbor, of course, India. In the maritime domain, they talk, it contests the role of India as a net security provider, as it would affect regions' security and economic interests negatively. How can a country which is being wanting to become a net security provider be impending or impeding or negatively giving the looking at this maritime domain? So this again shows an anti-India bias when it talks of the maritime security it is looking at. It is also looking at strategic stability through nuclear deterrence. So it is looking at strategic security, but it has brought in the nuclear card again into the play. While rest of the world, nowhere else, the nuclear deterrence is spoken to or written to in their apex policies. India is disturbing the strategic nuclear balance. It again brings out that it is India which is disturbing the strategic nuclear balance. It talks of cyber and info security. It talks of space, and it says need to strengthen and enhance space-based technology and its application. It is an aspirational kind of a thing. We know that China is helping to launch Pakistan's satellites in the near future. I am told there are talks of also 3 of them in the immediate future. It talks of hybrid threat. Now, this hybrid threat, it says it originates from states and its proxies and non-state actors. Again, it is not inward looking when it is identifying this threat. It is more looking at India when it talks of the hybrid kind of a threat. So this is in the chapter which is on defense and territorial integrity. Now let's come to the main points of the internal security. It says, and it is very, very, in fact, funny. It says Pak pursues zero tolerance for any groups involved in terrorist activities on its soil. So it does not follow a zero tolerance policy if the group is looking at terrorist activities beyond its borders, in India, in Afghanistan, in the neighborhood, within the region, or at the global level. So it is zero tolerance policy for any terrorist groups which are working within its soil. So it is essentially looking at TTP. It is not looking at Lashkar-e-Taiba. It is not looking at all the others, Jaish-e-Mohammed. It is not looking at other assets which are primarily aimed at hurting India. What about groups being promoted to undertake terrorist activities in India, within the region, and around the globe? That is a question which remains unanswered. It talks of violent subnationalism, but it has identified the need for that there is a violent subnationalism. But whom is it blaming? It is blaming the neighbor intelligence agencies. It has named NDS, it says R&AW. So it is again not identifying the role which ISI is himself playing, or what Clinton had said, that if you spawn snakes, they will come and bite you, or uh, be there for you also. It talks of four-pronged approach. Now, this approach is something which I liked. The only thing is that will they be able to reach this four-pronged approach? How they will how will it will manifest, or what is the road to reach there? It talks of a separate reconciliables and irreconcilable. So, is there something which can be reconciled? Let's reconcile. If there are some things which cannot be reconciled, let's leave that. Let's separate them. So that is one approach. The second is cut off the recruitment. So they are wanting to cut off the recruitment from these for this violent subnationalism, hinting more at, I would say, Balochistan, which is 40% of their land space. Cut off the financial support. Now, whether it is induced by the FATF and by other financial institutions, or it itself will be able, because even in Lal Masjid or even in other mosques which were there in Islamabad, one could see those kind of chunnis, chadars, and the kind of money which was being given there, whether it was going for the masjid or whether it was going for the sub-nationalist activities, one doesn't know. That's a moot question. And of course, it talked of addressing the governance issues where violent sub-nationalist elements operate. So that is something which, of course, they are looking at addressing the governance, that is the ground-based governance in these regions. It talked of extremism and sectarianism, where it says violent extremism ideologies cannot be allowed. Very good point. But if you read the newspapers and if you read the discussions, you know what happened when this businessman, Sadat Ali or Sadat Lal, or someone was killed about 5 days back. Sudan Lal was killed there. Then there was this Christian, I think, pastor who was killed a few days back. So there is a distinct gap between the what is being professed and what is happening on ground. It says prioritize interfaith and interfaith harmony. Now, daily we hear when the Ahmadiyyas itself are not recognized on your passports, the Shia mosques are targeted day in and day out. When your Hazaras and this kind of community, the Balochis, are targeted. So, what kind of interfaith harmony are they aspiring for is again a moot question. It also rightly says that we must promote de radicalization and present a united narrative against extremism. And lastly, it says there is a need for swift action against hate speech and material. Again, on ground, when you see this, it is nowhere evident. The other, the extreme end of this spectrum is what is more evident. So, these are a few of these security aspects which are something which I feel are not doable, at least in the immediate future. Baby steps, they say, have been taken for peace with the neighborhood. Doesn't seem, maybe implied in the document, are not visible to me when I go through the fine print of the document. And all the ills and woes which are now presently manifesting itself in Pakistan are being thrown as if into the lap of its bigger and powerful neighbor. Now I will tell you something, that the Hindu rate of growth, till the time it was Hindu rate of growth, or till the late 80s or early 90s, Pakistan was very happy, or quite okay with maintaining a equilibrium or a status quo with India. Since the time that this rapid economic growth of this country is visible, the hatred, or that feeling, that the two nation theory which was there, that hatred has now been replaced, I feel, by jealousy. And the jealousy has become more pronounced than the latent, or I would say subsurface hatred which is there, because of the history being taught to the generation. So is the generation being addressed? If we are talking of 100 years of peace with India, are we looking at changes within their education policy, within their state policy, within their neighbor foreign policy, within their defense policy? I have my doubts. One word about General Bajwa. I met him when he was a corps commander. I met him when he was in the GHQ, and I met him also when he was the chief. Comes out to be honest, upright, loud Punjabi. Belongs to Jalandhar. He very proudly gives out his roots from being in Jalandhar. And he whenever I met him, he always professed that I want peace with India. Now, whether the money is where the mouth is, whether what he was saying is actually what they are able to is a kind of a policy for Pak military to follow, I have my doubts. So he seemed or came out to be very sensible. He came out to be very dignified. He came out to be in control when he became the chief. But one extension down the line, second 3 years extension now, I am told being offered. So has he changed his stance? There is peace along the line of control. Is it in his interest or it is more in India's interest? I think it is more in his interest, in Pakistan's interest to have peace with India because of its woes. Thirdly, he wanted or expressed many times inter the movement of personnel and civilians. He professed more trade. Now, since the time we withdrew after Pulwama, the IMF status, there's hardly any trade between the two countries. And we are still battling for that wheat to be sent to Afghanistan. And I'm told that now the trucks will come from Afghanistan, pick up the wheat from Wagah border, and then take them across to that place. There's no trade. Now, in whose interest it will be? Whatever trade is there, they are buying the same Indian products at double or more than double the cost via UAE or via UK. But the fact is that trade is negligible. Now, to resume trade, is it in our interest or in their interest? Again, I leave it at that. But the internal security situation, before I culminate and continue with that, the TTP, the truce held only for 1 month, not even 30 days it held. The TLP, they had to back down and agree to all their demands. So the fringe political parties, the mullahs, the militant, they have overtaken, or I would say, the kind of activities are on the resurgence. The army per se has always been on the back foot. And we don't know. There is gag order on the media. We've only gone through what the ISPR has said in this Pangur and this Nosiki. I am told that more than 100 FC soldiers are dead, including a major general whose helicopter has been brought down. But it is only coming in the social media. It is not being talked of by the Pak media. It is not being talked of anywhere else. While the BLA and the BNA is professing that not only 100 soldiers have been killed, but they are still in control of the camps there. So there has been an uptick in violence, not only in Balochistan, not only along the Afghanistan border, but in the hinterland. After a long time, there was an attack in the Karachi Kamri area of Islamabad and the Anarkali Bazar in Lahore. So it is not only TTP, there are also elements of the Baluch Liberation Army which have now increased the level of violence which is happening in whole of Pakistan. So will it sustain? Will the army which did its Zarbe Momim under General Rahil Sharif, the scorched earth policy in North Waziristan, in South Waziristan, and other parts of the KPK, will that policy, will that they be able to follow it in the hinterland? Will they be able to implement those kind of policies in Lahore or Islamabad? Is a moot question. So there are on ground lot of internal security issues which may not allow Pakistan to go or move towards stabilizing their economy, improving connectivity, improving trade. Tapi is a non-starter, so nothing is coming from Afghanistan towards India. No kind of money will go to them. The Iran, Pakistan, India pipeline is a non-starter, as also the kind of train which was to start from Pakistan, Iran, and go on to Turkey is also, I am told, the only one train in the last 10 years has gone. That is also seems to be a non-starter. So all these kind of indicators are showing that implementing this policy will is in the immediate future or foreseeable future going to be very difficult. I think I'll stop here and I'll then continue in the discussion phase. Thank you.
General Bhatia has raised some very pointed observations on security aspects, and maybe our guests from Islamabad would like to respond to those subsequently. I just want to add that after Kargil, barring these skirmishes at the line of control, I think about 80,000 odd people which Pakistan has lost is because of the violence which has come from some of these terrorist organizations there. And if you look at the profile of attacks in Balochistan, and now its sort of linkages with Afghanistan, some of these merger of these organizations like Baloch Liberation Army and some other organizations have merged. Similarly, this Tehrik-e-Taliban of Pakistan, there are about 5 odd groups that have merged. I think it's high time that you internalize this national security than to sort of give too much of focus to an external abatement to this. But that is for you to take a call of. I was listening to a very recent exposition by Ambassador Bassett in his popular show Kaleidoscope, in which he said central to improvement of relations with India is resolution of Kashmir dispute. His comments on the national security policy was that unless Kashmir is resolved, we are not going any way forward. So maybe he would be like to elucidate on this very hard line that he's been taking on Kashmir. But we are very happy to welcome him. He is very well known here in India, being the High Commissioner. He's also had very prestigious stints in Russia, US, UK, and most of the European countries. He's been an author and associated with Islamabad Policy Research Institute and also Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies. So may I request Ambassador Bassett to give his initial remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and thank you very much, USI, and greetings to all the esteemed panelists and the participants. Indeed, it was a treat to listen to General Bhatia, and most of his comments yet again reinforced my views that Pakistan-India relations are still yet to go a long way in order to build mutual trust and bridges and cooperative frameworks. Be that as it may, I would make very few brief comments and then say as to see how the discussion goes. I'm one of those who publicly express the view that perhaps we did not require this national security policy to be made public, in the sense that most of most parts of the policy cannot be made public or have not been made public. The entire policy is led to misinterpretation, and people are drawing misplaced conclusions as well about what Pakistan is trying to do. There is no doubt the policy in its overall context is aspiration, as would be any policy. And I fully agree that a policy has to be also realistic, in addition to be aspirational. So there is nothing wrong if Pakistan is aspiring a few things, both internally and externally. So I would rather say that yes, policy has to be implementable, doable, but there is nothing wrong if the national security policy of Pakistan, as it has been made public, sounds aspirational. Uh, Now, if you ask me, there is nothing really earth-shaking in the national security policy, because most of the stuff which you find in this policy, you already have, we already have in our constitution. If you go through the Constitution of Pakistan of 1973, you find each and everything, barring a few elements which are relatively new, like cyberspace and hybrid warfare and so on and so forth. Rest of the stuff is you find from Article 3 to Article 40 in the Pakistan Constitution: national cohesion, and finding the societal equilibrium, and balanced development of all the regions, and to have peace within and peace without. So all these things are there. Now, there are, in Pakistan too, we have differences of opinion on this. Some would say that the focus on geoeconomics is perhaps misplaced, because geoeconomics does not operate or work in a vacuum. You cannot practically isolate it from what is happening on the geostrategic front. And that is a plausible argument, in my view, because yes, Pakistan has been focusing on geoeconomics now for decades. This is not something new. It has not been, diverged on us that now we need to focus on geoeconomics. Pakistan has been focusing on geoeconomics, but unfortunately, because of the geopolitical situation internally and in our neighborhood, Pakistan has not been able to uh, uh, take off economically, unfortunately, and for a variety of reasons. Afghanistan conflict next door, then our troubled relations with India, all these factors did contribute in one way or another, and did not allow Pakistan to put itself on an economic trajectory, which is kind of, which has taken Pakistan uh, economically at least to take off. Then it is also about the global politics which is being played out. So there are some indications in this, in the public version of the national security policy, that Pakistan, perhaps, while yesterday our Prime Minister was in Beijing and a very comprehensive joint statement has been issued, which reiterated the importance of the China-Pakistan strategic partnership. But at the same time, if you go through the the national security policy, Pakistan also expresses desire to reach out to the US. So Pakistan, in the years to come, in my view, would find it difficult how to manage this strategic partnership and how to evolve a meaningful, mutually beneficial relationship with the US. So that remains a challenge for Pakistan. And it would not be very easy in my view, because uh, whereas the US has, kind of evolved a partnership with India, India has become a member of the Quad. So we will see in the years to come some fissures, both in India and Pakistan. India would also find it very difficult to be in two different boats, sailing in two different directions. As tensions increase between US, Russia, US, China, it will continue to be very difficult for India as well as to how to balance its strategic relationship with the dynamics of the region itself. As we have seen recently, India had to abstain from in the United Nations Security Council on discussion on Ukraine. Two last things I would like to mention. In India, my Indian friends should not get this impression. First, that Pakistan is putting the Jammu and Kashmir dispute on the back burner. And if we are talking about geoeconomics, that somehow means that Pakistan is ready to capitulate or give up its principal position on Jammu and Kashmir. That is unlikely to happen, in my view, no matter which government comes. There can be we have tried in the past many such approaches that to put the Kashmir issue on the back burner, but we have seen that time and again this issue would come up and would take us to stalemate. And we have been consuming our energies on how to break deadlocks. We are moving from a stalemate to a stalemate. So, and then our Indian friends should also understand that peace is not in the region, is not only in Pakistan's interest, it is also in your interest. India cannot realize its regional and global aspirations unless it is in peace with its neighbors, particularly with Pakistan and China. You cannot expect to realize your potential unless you have peace with these two countries. So, my Indian friends who are saying that peace is in Pakistan, only more in Pakistan's interest, yes, it is in our interest, and we always wanted to have peace, normal relations with India. But unfortunately, India as a bigger country, we did not find it. We did not find India forthcoming to resolve this issue, the core dispute between our two countries. And the 5th August 2019 steps which India took they have further complicated the bilateral equation, in my view. And now it is for India to revisit the drawing board as to how it can really, break the impasse between our two countries. But if India does not really move forward, India does not show flexibility or do not talk on Kashmir, then my experience tells me that, and the history is any guide, we would be again back to square one. So I do not have any hope. No matter the NSP talks about building bridges, connectivity, but there is deep mutual distrust between our two countries. Let's be realistic about it. And that cannot be wished away by some cosmetic measures here and there. We have to deal with the basics, with the fundamentals of our mutual mistrust. And unless that happens, my worry is that this region will continue to be stuck in such a situation where we'll continue to be apprehending each other all the time. We would not be able to put our relationship on a positive trajectory. And this relationship will continue to be, prone to conflicts and prone to unnecessary, can be, interminable arms race as well. So this national security policy, though it can be, many people in Pakistan are applauding it as a good document. Yes, it's a good document in the sense that it brings everything together, and it may not be implementable in many respects. Yes, my Indian colleagues are right, but Pakistan is trying to tell the world that Pakistan is an important country in this region. You cannot ignore it, and Pakistan will remain. It is an important country for China, for BRI, because CPAC remains the flagship project. But we also understand that how CPAC is an eyesore to many countries in the region and beyond. and they are trying their best to ensure that CPAC does not go forward, is not actualized. And Pakistan is cognizant of that. There are many proxies who are working at the behest of other countries in order to make sure that Balochistan does not destabilize, in order to make sure that Afghanistan remains unstable on our western border. So this is all part of regional politics as well as global politics, which is being played out on both, on especially on our western border. So Pakistan is fully cognizant of that. Now the question is whether Pakistan would be able to first to deal with the situation in Afghanistan, how it can help to bring to put Afghanistan, on a path which leads to stability, and Afghanistan does not melt down economically, because we would be the direct effectee of the turmoil or any other civil war in Afghanistan. So that is not in our interest. Dictates us that we have peace and stability in Afghanistan. And Pakistan has been working, whereas there are countries who would not like Afghanistan to settle down. And there is no, we do not have any doubt as to which are the countries who are behind that, because these countries do not want the CPAC to really go forward. On the other hand, Dr. Bhatia said General Bhatia said that it is not inward looking. I think that is wrong. That is not the correct proposition. After 16th December 2014, terror attack in Peshawar, in which over 160 children were killed, Pakistan came up with the Zarb-e-Azb operation. Pakistan then that continued under the name of Radul Fasad operation. And Pakistan is very clear that it would not allow violence within Pakistan, or not allow the Pakistan's territory to be used for violence anywhere in the world. So Pakistan has been trying its level best, but then I have been reading a few articles, published in India, which boastfully claim that India has 35,000 people in Pakistan on its payroll, who are there to continue igniting trouble in Pakistan. So that is very serious. If India, through its offensive defense doctrine, continues to exploring possibilities as to how to destabilize Pakistan, then I'm kind of, I do not know how we can bring this region or push this region towards stability, connectivity, and regional integration, which is also in India's interest, as I said earlier. So it's not a one-sided thing. Pakistan has been through many, many challenges, but Pakistan has always shown resilience and has always come out of those problems. We still face myriad of problems, myriad of challenges. There is no question about that. Like in India, there is everything is not hunky-dory in India either. We every now and then we see videos of what is happening to minorities, what is the RSS agenda. All these things are there, and I'm sure my esteemed colleagues are aware of the undercurrents in what is happening in the Indian society these days. We do have serious issues, and those issues are not limited to Pakistan. Let's be more realistic. My only plea to my Indian friends is, let's be more realistic. There are serious issues which need to be resolved. Through the back channel, we have been able to agree on the ceasefire on 25th of February last year. Now I understand that there are some back channel contacts on the Siachen issue as well, following the Indian Army Chief's remarks on demilitarization of India. I remember meeting National Security Advisor Ajit Doval when our Prime Minister made a statement, then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in the UNGA, offering that let's formalize our 2003 understanding on ceasefire agreement, and then also have, demilitarized Siachen and so on and so forth. But Mr. Ajit Doval was very clear that Siachen cannot be separated from the overall settlement of the Kashmir dispute. But now this time, India, for its own reasons, because of the situation in eastern Ladakh, and perhaps under pressure from the US, is trying to to separate, de-link the Siachen issue from the Kashmir dispute. And we are seeing some steps here and there, but at the end of the day, even if I do not see as to how Siachen, I mean, though it has in Pakistan's proposal to make it a green park and so on and so forth, but the question remains that whether India is serious about engaging Pakistan on resolving the core dispute, that is Jammu and Kashmir, or it is trying to engage Pakistan and buy time to consolidate its illegal occupation of the and do everything. And if that is the case, then I'm afraid our national security policy would not be able to yield much, because much hinges on Pakistan-India relations. And he's absolutely right, General Bhatia and Professor Sanjay Baru also alluded to that. You find there is a separate section on India, because the policy talks about all the neighbors and as to how Pakistan would like to establish its relations with its neighbors. So India is the key in my view. Afghanistan is very, very important for us, but India remains the key when it comes to our external relations. And I would not for a moment think that Pakistan can have regional stability without having some sort of, putting our relationship with India and, resolving our problems once and for all. We have fought for 74 years. I think it is high time for our Indian friends, rather than to be condescending and patronizing Pakistan. It is important that they be realistic this time around. If India is willing to push this region into another Cold War by joining the Quad and by not having and having some tensions with China, then obviously we cannot really expect much. But if India is serious about its own economic growth, sustained economic growth, peace in the region, it would hinge on India. I think it is imperative for India to reach out to Pakistan and correct, and then undo all those things which reinforce this bilateral or mutual tension and hostility. So it is time, I think, for both the countries to revisit the drawing board. And but half-baked measures would not help, in my view. Half-hearted measures would not help this time round. We have to be serious about it. India is no doubt a bigger country, so much more responsibility lies with India in order to pave the way for realistic and for solutions, for palatable solutions. And this is, I mean, I'm one of those. I would just end by saying that I'm one of those that who I would always promote a normal relationship with India, because I do feel that it is in Pakistan's interest, but not at any cost. Not at any cost. Pakistan does have a principled policy on different issues, and I'm sure India too. And it is time that we engage purposefully, rather than biding time or prevaricating or procrastinating on issues. That had not worked in the past, and that would not work in future either. So it is, I mean, our national security policy may have many gaping holes as far as implementation is concerned. And I fully agree with that because much would depend as to how our other regional players respond to it, how the world international community, particularly the US and the Western countries, respond to it. So it cannot be implemented in isolation. It would also be important as to how other players in the region respond to this policy. Only then can perhaps we expect that our aspirations can be met. And if our aspirations are uh, mutually complementary or supplement each other, all the better. And I would be kind of, touting for this policy. To a certain extent, as today we are discussing this national security policy, my feeling is that we are talking about, again, we have come back to the same situation where our highlighting problems in our respective societies. No society is perfect. We have our own problems. They are perhaps in different ways sui generis. In other ways, they are not. Let's hope that if we are discussing Pakistan's national security policy, but I'm very clear that this policy would mostly remain aspirational, as General Bhatia said, but it would remain aspirational because other countries in the region do not want it to be implemented in its entirety, because there are many ifs and buts here and there, and we're all aware of that. And I do not want to live in a world where we just, our Madam Sethi was referred to by Sanjay Baru Sahab, it's a wish list, and he dismissed it. Yes, it's a wish list, but I would not dismiss it because, as I said earlier, as far as its implementation is concerned, much predicates on how the regional countries respond to it. That, to me, is the bottom line in my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Basit. You have, I think, given a lot of focus to India in your articulation, and I hope that was reflected in the document that government has taken out. But I'm very certain that I think the classified portion would have a lot to say about India. And we would also discuss, and I request Ambassador Raghavan to comment on that, that you have again reiterated your stand about victimhood card, whether it is scuttling of China-Pakistan economic corridor, or it is again the internal woes of Pakistan, that probably there are external agencies which are responsible and they are steadfastly working towards destabilizing Pakistan. So that we could discuss little later. And now may I request Ambassador Raghavan, who is probably the most, I would say, profound expert on Pakistan, having had a lot of stints, dealt it with at different level, including being a High Commissioner to Pakistan, and he's also written number of books, and his very well written book is The People Next Door, The Curious History of India's Relation with Pakistan. So may I request Ambassador Raghavan to give his final remarks in this session. And then we'll have the question answer. Ambassador Raghavan. I can't see him. Sharat, let's try and connect with Ambassador Raghavan.
Did you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, General Sharma. How long do I have? About 10 minutes?
About 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll try to stick to that time, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. And I'm very happy to interact with Dr. Sanjay Baru, with General Bhatia, Ambassador Basit, and General Lodi, and I've benefited a great deal from all the views expressed. There's nothing very much left to say after such a detailed discussion, but I'll pick on two or three strands which interested me in particular, beginning with what Professor Baru had referred to as the basic effort of this document to find a balance between geoeconomics and geostrategic interest. And he, I think, quite correctly felt that the central thrust of this document was being misunderstood by many commentators in India. I think the fact is that any document of this kind will always be seen in two contexts. One is the internal and the other is the external. And certainly there is a great deal in this document from a particularly Pakistani context, which we should not overlook when we see it from an external perspective. But let me begin by a point made by General Lodi, which I think is really central to our whole discussion and really central to understanding this new document. And this was, he referred to the point about national security and national interest. And I think this relationship between national security and national interest has often been deeply misunderstood in Pakistan. Because of Pakistan's own internal history, I think the securitization of its thinking has been much more, to a much greater extent, than it would have otherwise been. And therefore, the view gained ground in certain quarters that national interest is the same as national security, or national interest is entirely composed of national security, when in fact national interest is a component of national security is a component of national interest. National interest, as General Lodi said, is a much wider term. It includes welfare, your economic development, your employment, your how people live, how they feel. There are many aspects to national interest, and certainly national security is a vital component, but it is one component. And in that context, perhaps this document is also saying the same thing. And it says that we have to give a certain greater primacy to geoeconomics. It's trying to restore a particular balance in internal Pakistani discourse because it feels that the discourse has been heavily securitized or excessively securitized over the years. And on this point, I think both Professor Sanjay Baru and what General Lodi said about national interest, it's a useful takeaway that we should not look at it only from the perspective of external actors, but see it within a particularly Pakistani debate. My own objection or my own disappointment with this security policy is that while this point is a valid one, in fact, the internal debate in Pakistan over the years has considerably advanced beyond this general statement that geoeconomics is something which is very significant and we should not overlook it, or national interest has other aspects apart from national security. So what Ambassador Basit said, that geoeconomics has been discussed for many years, and I would tend to agree with that, yes, Pakistan has, all countries face very difficult choices when they seek to reconcile national interest and national security. Because sometimes national interest requires that you make trade-offs with national security. And that is the overall judgment which is exercised by the leadership of the country. I think Pakistan, because of its own history in the last quarter century, has had to make particularly painful choices when it comes to balancing national interest with national security. And it is a moot point to what extent it has been able to find the right balance. But nevertheless, it has had a very, very painful experience in trying to reconcile or trying to harmonize or smoothen the interface between these two concepts. Uh, to my mind, my disappointment with this document is that it somehow takes too complacent a view or too sanguine a view about this very painful experience of Pakistan in trying to reconcile this dynamic, constant dynamic, if I may say, between national interest and national security. Because to some extent, one can say that the difficult choices which Pakistan has had to make are not fully reflected in this document, and it is taking too sanguine or too complacent or too simplistic a view of the very, very difficult choices that confront Pakistan today. Otherwise, as a document, yes, it has to be aspirational. Yes, it has to reflect certain national goals. It is inevitably going to lead to a debate about how it touches on certain points and doesn't touch on other points. I think those aspects are all there. The second point I wish to touch on was the perspective which Ambassador Basit mentioned, and then General Bhatia had also referred to, that geoeconomics requires that Pakistan place Jammu and Kashmir on the back burner, and how this view will never be acceptable to people in Pakistan. Now, I cannot disagree with that at all. I think we have a very simplistic understanding of Pakistan, or Pakistanis have a very simplistic understanding of India when they talk about a hard line on Kashmir or a soft line on Kashmir. I think both in Pakistan and in India, we have to recognize that there is a single national position on Jammu and Kashmir. There is no hard line and soft line. Those hard lines and soft lines are only the different kinds of articulations depending on the platforms in which these articulations are made. These are widely divergent foundational differences. And the question is that there is therefore no hard line or soft line. It is not as if you will find a set of actors with whom you will find it possible to suddenly come up with a so-called quote unquote solution for either country. Because these are foundational principles and these are foundational differences. It is often assumed in India and Pakistan that our differences arise only because of a certain provocation. So the prevailing discourse in Pakistan is that it is August 2019 which is really the issue. No, it's not so. There are many people in India who believe that terrorism with Pakistan is the central issue and there is nothing else to discuss. I think we tend to overlook that our differences have persisted over 75 years. That is a very, very long period of time. It certainly predates August 2019. It certainly predates the 1990s, from which the terrorism threat became a very potent one for India. These are foundational differences. And the question is, how do you move forward when you have to address foundational differences? And I think that is really the central issue which confronts us in India and Pakistan today. It is a fact that the best minds in both countries over a very long period of time have tried to come up with a so-called quote unquote solution and have largely failed in that attempt. Why is that? Perhaps wisdom lies in recognizing that there is never going to be a solution which is acceptable to both sides. And then the more difficult choice which confronts both countries is that can you live with optimal solutions rather than perfect solutions? And once you're talking about optimality, rather than trying to think that somehow you can make progress towards a perfect solution, then you're in a different ball game. Then it means recognizing that, like many other neighboring countries across the world, you are going to have relations which are always ridden with friction, which are always going to be very difficult, but they have a certain element of stability inbuilt in them so that you don't start progressing too quickly up an escalation ladder. I think those are the kind of questions which we have to address when we are dealing with India-Pakistan relations in all seriousness. Because one thing is very clear, that you will not find a soft line in India on Jammu and Kashmir, and you will not find a soft line in Pakistan on Jammu and Kashmir. There is only a single line in both countries, and we have to accept that perhaps we have to live with this difference in fundamental approach. And if you have to live with it, then the question is, what are the optimal positions you can try to reach while recognizing that the relationship is going to be very difficult. And this really is my problem with the national security policy document, that this complexity somehow doesn't come out. And by placing a certain onus on August 2019, it really evades the issue. Now, August 2019, one can have any kind of view one chooses. There is a broad menu to choose from. But the fact is that it was a change carried out by an Indian legislative process. Now, India has never recognized any of the legislative processes which Pakistan has carried out with regard to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And if you don't recognize the basic legislative process itself, then why are the details of that process suddenly so important for Pakistan? That is really the question which we have to address. Why has the Jammu and Kashmir legislature become important only after August 2019, when it was not important before August 2019? I think the central point is therefore missed when we look at the immediate provocation rather than the structural issues which exist in neighboring country relations. I have exceeded my 10 minutes, so I'll stop here, and thank you very much again for having invited me.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Raghavan. I would now request some comments from the panelists here. Going by what is indicated in the open document and given the nature of our relations with Pakistan, what could possibly be covered in the classified portion? So I would start with the Ambassador Sanjay Baru.
Not an ambassador.
Sorry, Professor Sanjay Baru.
Well, I mean, what would be so Mark's game to try and, but what is it that I would like to see in the secret part of such a document? Two ideas. I think given the emphasis in the document on the internal problems of Pakistan, I would like to see a much more honest and detailed discussion on how they would intend to deal with it. I think there's a lot of focus on internal, what they call subnationalism, terrorism, sectarianism, all the problems that in many ways we also face, they also face. And therefore, a more detailed discussion of those one would expect in whatever is a secret or the unclassified or the classified part. But the second thing I would like to see is, taking off from what Raghavan just said, is a serious discussion on the solution to the Kashmir problem. I mean, I entirely agree with Raghavan that there is no soft line, there's no hard line, there's one line, and that there's no best solution. There could be an optimal solution, a second best solution, and we worked at a second best solution. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and President Musharraf worked towards a second best solution. And honestly, I cannot think of another second best solution. The problem is that in both countries, there are people are not willing to accept that that is the second best solution, that is the optimal solution. There is no other solution in my judgment. So if the Pakistanis are willing to come to that judgment, and at some point this current regime also comes to that point, then that's the way to go forward.
Thank you. Thank you. We have just got some jugaad, moving this laptop from one speaker to another. So now may I request General Bhatia to give his opinion on the hidden portion.
Thank you, sir. I'll keep it very short. As far as I feel, India would be comprising, or India-Pakistan relations would be comprising almost 80% of the confidential part of this. And again, Pakistan and US relations would also be having a major distinct kind of a flavor in that. And definitely things about Afghanistan and its stability under the present regime, because it is only 5 years of the document which we are looking at. So India, US, and Afghanistan in that priority, in my view, would form a distinct part of the documentation. Of course, the internal security issues, the need to improve ties with India, not only in the security domain, but also in the trade and the interpersonal. The Kartarpur corridor was something which we saw a couple of years back, and recently Indian government has proposed that more such sites and avenues should be seen, where we can promote this kind of a people to people contact being made. So these kind of aspects would definitely, as to how to improve the connectivity, the trade, the interpersonal relationship, while maintaining peace along the line of control, would form a major chunk of the document. Thank you.
Thank you. My own reading of the document, brings out that, well, there is a deliberate attempt to put a lot of focus on this Hindutva ideology being a threat. Then again, Kashmir has been repeatedly termed as a vital national security interest. There is also a talk about growing military imbalance between India and Pakistan, particularly India's tied in the nuclear domain, and also, a very nuanced sort of a debate on review of the nuclear doctrine by India, about India's influence operations, particularly what India is doing in the Western countries, and heightened threat perception about hybrid threat. And there is, as it came out through Ambassador Bassett's discourse, that there is a talk about, maybe that some forces are not very happy with the success of China-Pakistan economic corridor and things like that. Now, keeping that in view, what would, in your view, be the classified portion, or what should it contain? May I have the views from a panelist from Pakistan, Ambassador Bassett, and then General Lodi?
Thank you very much. My guess would be as good as yours, but as it is said in the document itself, most of the implementation plan is in the classified document as to how all these aspirational things or policy matters will be implemented. So that is in the classified part of the document. So I hope that they do have a tenable, sustainable plan of action, both in the context of addressing the internal challenges from violence to extremism, we all know, and then on the external front as well. But I must say something about that. Ambassador Raghavan very rightly pointed out that, and in Pakistan too, we are not talking about a perfect solution, but a solution which is plausible, which is acceptable to both sides, and which is acceptable to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. That is, I think, the point we all need to make in order to move forward. And let's hope that the plan of action or the document, the classified part of the document, does contain a plausible, tenable, and doable plan of action. And then we must also understand that it is not something etched in stone. It will be reviewed every year, and this document is for 5 years. You never know, the next government will come and build on it, and it's an ongoing process. I think it will evolve and develop organically. And the next government in 2023, we have elections in Pakistan. And then the government might review it, may bring it to the parliament, some aspects of this policy. So it's still, a kind of, I mean, an open-ended thing in my view. We still are grappling with many gaping holes, as I said earlier. And I myself find many, many contradictions in this document. Let's be honest about it. And how we would overcome those inherent contradictions, that I think is the challenge. And I hope that the classified document does contain responses or answers to all these challenges in one way or another. Thank you very much. We can't hear you.
Jan Lodhi, may I request you to just enlighten us what possibly could be in the classified portion, at least some bullet points? Jan Lodhi, he's not there.
You unmute him, please.
He's muted. You may be muted.
General Sharma, you may.
Thank you. It was not in my control. I was muted and it was not in my control. Thank you very much. I think it is interesting to ask this question, that what could be there in the portion which has not been made public. And my guess would be slightly informed guess. So I just hope and pray that I don't spill the beans. But I can understand that because they have said in the revealed portion that geoeconomics is very important. So it is not only the hardcore security aspects which must be there in the portion which has not been made public, but also the aspects of economy, and I will just say that what could be that, and internal cohesion, the reasons and how we can further, solidify ourselves internally, and of course the hardcore matters also. I think as far as the economy is concerned, they must have deliberated whether all our economic woes are because of our own doings totally, or it has something to do with something else like economic hitmen or some other interference. I think they would have dilated on that. As far as internal cohesion is concerned, again, whatever is happening to us in Balochistan or elsewhere, they must have been discussed candidly that again, what are the fault lines which are available to the detractors, and whether those fault lines are really being exploited, and do we have any reasons to believe that, and how can we respond to that? That must have been there. And as far as hardcore security is concerned, of course, there must be things about hybrid war, and I'll just talk about it in a moment. And of course, the nuclear policy, whether it is working or it is not working. About the hybrid war, of course, the economy is a part of it, and the internal cohesion is also a part of it. I think one thing which they should have deliberated. I feel, and my personal view, and I keep on telling my leadership, that in hybrid war, if you try to remain defensive, it becomes expensive and it's very difficult proposition. How many mosques and how many bazaars and how many schools and how many cities you will defend? If you can find out that who's doing this to us, if and you have credible evidence on that, unless you go offensive, and only then there will be a parity, and only then the others will talk to you. I mean, whoever is doing it. This has always been my contention, that, and I've been saying that just look at the circumstances once we were able to talk to each other, and you will realize that the pain which is being caused to us if the other side was feeling the same pain, they did talk to us. Not once, but many times. This time, I think it seems that pain is one way, and unless it becomes two-way, there will be no talks. This is what I've just mixed up what I think should be there and what I suggest to be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There is a question from the audience here that there is a disconnect between Pakistan making bold strides in science and technology and modernizing its education system vis-a-vis adopting a universal Islamic system of education. How do you reconcile the two?
If you want me to take it first, I think we are working and we have moved quite ahead as far as the universal syllabus is concerned. Especially this government, this was one of the cornerstone of their policies, and now unified syllabus has been prepared, where it has been made mandatory for any type of school, whether it is the English medium or Urdu medium or Islamic, madrasas, that minimum portion of that syllabus will have to be there, and it takes care of the scientific education and other modern things which should be there in any education policy. So yes, the questioner is right in assuming that we have different syllabi going on, but I think we are now making a check on that, and a unified syllabus is enforced already, and I think it is 6 months or a year before that we are on it. So now we have a common syllabus which has to be followed in all types of schooling systems.
I would request some of the audience from here to ask a question, but before that, I have one more question for General Lodi.
Ji, sir.
What is this thinking in Pakistan military establishment? Do you really think India is an existential threat to Pakistan?
I think the balance which has now been created because of this nuclear parity, we don't think that it is that way. In the thinking of the Pakistani military is now a bit relaxed as far as existential threat from India is concerned. But because, in my opinion, now this is the thinking which I have just shared with you, and now I will give my extended opinion. The military needs to realize in Pakistan that the nature of threat has changed a lot, because this nuclear parity does not allow large-scale conventional conflict. So the conflict has been suppressed in the zone of low-intensity conflict, in the zone of economic conflict, in the zone of political, things and all that, and that is beyond the scope of any army. What to say of Pakistan Army? Pakistan Army may be having a little bit of inklings in these things also because of our special role. But this thinking is there, I think, that there is no immediate and existential threat from. We are quite confident about that, but there are other threats which India might use or may be using to erode our provinces otherwise, to erode us, in other zones. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question for Ambassador Basit from Ambassador Amar Sinha that he wants that in the classified portion, what possibly could be about how should Pakistan balance its relation between China and United States. Your views, Ambassador Basit?
Yeah, if you read the section under the heading US, it clearly says that Pakistan does not subscribe to camp politics. So this was one way of conveying to the US that while we do have a strategic partnership with the China for a variety of reasons, but that does not be taken as if we cannot have a mutually beneficial relationship with the US. And this is a challenge for Pakistan, no doubt, as I mentioned earlier. And I hope that they do have a strategy as to how to go about it. And the other day, a statement by the US State Department spokesperson that Pakistan is strategically very important for the US, and we have I mean, Pakistan and US would like to have a positive, constructive relationship with Pakistan. That I think is something constructive, positive, which has come out from Washington D.C. And let's hope that the two countries do have some contacts. And now we have a new ambassador going there. Let's hope that we would be able to at least, if we can't have a strategic partnership with the US, let's be very honest about it. But we do have a very strong diaspora there, close to 1 million US citizens of Pakistan heritage living there. So they are a kind of living bridge between the two countries. So whether we like it or not, Pakistan, US will continue to have a good relationship in the sense that US will continue to be one of our major trading partners. It still is, and there are many opportunities, areas in which, and then the US also recently donated 47 million doses of coronavirus, COVID vaccines to Pfizer vaccines to Pakistan. So US is willing to engage with Pakistan because of Afghanistan. And also, I think this is also important in the context of resolving problems between Pakistan and India as well. And I think Pakistan it would be sensible for Pakistan to continue its engagement, rather inject more activity in the bilateral relationship. And I'm sure that our policymakers do have some concrete suggestions in this behalf. Thank you.
If I'm allowed to just say a sentence on this. आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है अभी हमें.
We can't hear you, Sharma.
Asking the audience here, who are sitting here physically, to give us one set of questions, and then in a package I can put it to the panelists.
We can't hear.
मुझे तो कोई आवाज नहीं आ रही.
There is just an opinion here by one of our officers. He says that this context and the timing and the tone and tenor of the document reveals that the people who have authored this document, they are trying to have some very conciliatory approach towards the West, because Pakistan has gone very close towards China, and at the same time they want to assuage some of the concerns of the West. This is just a comment, and there is a very pointed question for Ambassador Bassett, that what is his bottom line on Kashmir and what formula does he provide for resolution of Kashmir conflict. And there's another question connected with that from Air Marshal Bhatia, that we've not talked about cross-border terrorism, which is India, which has been and which continues to be India's principal concern. Ambassador Bassett?
I think I would not like to put the cart before the horse. First of all, Pakistan and India need to engage with each other and discuss between themselves as to how this dispute can be resolved. There have been many formulas, many options which were discussed between the two countries between 2004 and 2000 till until 2000, I would say 14. But we could not achieve much on the back channel. So I would be reluctant because it's the Rubik's cube, this resolving Pakistan-India relations. So I would not venture into discussing options publicly. It is for the two countries to first engage. But I would underscore that Kashmir first diplomacy is now needed between Pakistan and India. This is what my bottom line is. If the two countries engage seriously with the sense of seriousness and purposefulness, I'm sure we do have brains on both sides which would be able to find a tenable solution which is also acceptable to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And that, I think, is essential. And let's hope that the two countries would be moving in that direction, and sooner the better.
If I am allowed to add.
Yes, please.
About Kashmir, I think it's best for us to remain anchored to our basic stance that it should be resolved according to the UN resolutions, UN Security Council resolutions, because that gives us the moral ascendancy. But at the same time, I'm personally of the view that we are not saying that first resolve the Kashmir issue and then we will have trade or then we will talk. What most of us are saying is that please stop the atrocities in Indian held Kashmir, and we can start trade. We can start talking, and the Kashmir solution will keep talking, and it can take time, and maybe it will be resolved later on. This is my view. Secondly, about cross-border terrorism, if I think it has to be understood by the leadership, and they need to sit together and talk on this. But let me just say that we have Yadev Kulbhushan with us. What was he doing here? And what was happening to us once we were in a nutcracker and, from being attacked from Afghanistan as well as this side also. And then what is happening nowadays in Balochistan? So who should be talking about terrorism? I think both of us should be talking about terrorism, not only Indians or not only Pakistanis. And I would say that we are quite intelligent races on both sides, intelligent people. Why should we have this 1.5 billion people hostage to our misunderstandings and not talking to each other and not coming out candid with each other? I mean, you cannot hide what you are doing to us. We cannot hide what we do to you. So why can't we sit down like honorable and civilized people and discuss openly that please you stop doing this and we will stop doing that, whatever, I mean, something on those lines. So yes, cross-border terrorism is a problem. We need to talk on that, and it must be there in the portion which has not been revealed. And about Kashmir, I have said that we can have trade, we can have everything, but please stop the atrocities in Indian held Kashmir, and then we can move forward. Thank you.
I think we need one more discussion to talk about this equivalence of cross-border terrorism. It's a debate by itself because I don't think we should use this forum to get more into this. But I'll request a quick response from our Indian panelists here with reference to particularly this repeated reference to UN resolution on Kashmir, because I have my own understanding of that, but I would rather leave it to our panelists. and also request Professor Sanjay Baru to give his concluding remark.
We can't hear you, Sanjay Baru. Professor Baru, we can't hear.
ये आवाज नहीं आ रही.
Can't hear.
Okay.
Sorry, I was saying on the Kashmir issue, I think it's all, most of us agree that there is no perfect solution. There is we have to work towards an acceptable solution. And that acceptable solution, there is a framework on the table. It's a framework that will require both countries to to stop pretending that their current projected maps are the real maps of their countries. Now, which political leader in either of the two countries has the courage to come up and say that? We'll wait and see.
So, if we want to stick to the UN resolution, it is a horse long dead. We can't continue to flog a dead horse because the parameters or the preconditions to a UN resolution were never met, cannot be met in hindsight now. So the only solution without going to a war is status quo. But is that acceptable? As the professor said, we need to be candid and forthright and say that this is the solution. For that, we need to stop cross-border terrorism and also stop talking of atrocities on Kashmiris, which are more a kind of a conspiracy narrative, which always comes up out from Pakistan. 90% of the talk shows in Pakistan and one TV9 Bharat something, it talks of Pakistan at that 9 p.m. prime time. Otherwise, India doesn't talk of Pakistan. While all the talk shows of Pakistan talks of India. And if it becomes such an emotive issue, then there can't be pragmatism. There can't be kind of hard decisions which can be taken. So I can leave it at that. Status quo is the only option if you are looking at J&K.
Before I request Ambassador Raghavan to come in, I just want to say that, the whole discourse here in India about Jammu and Kashmir has undergone a change, at least from the government side. Today, we say that the only unresolved issue is Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Gilgit Baltistan, Shaksgam Valley having been ceded to China, and also this presence of China and Gilgit Baltistan, and that is the Indian narrative here this side. So the positions have actually hardened. So we have to, the diplomacy demands that you don't get into the logjam of these very strident and hardened positions. If we remain stuck there, then there is not going to be any solution. And this realization has to come from both sides in regard to every time, hammering this efficacy of UN resolution. I'll request Ambassador Raghavan to talk about it.
Well, there is a lot to talk about, but my own view is that see, India and Pakistan cannot reinvent the wheel. However brilliant we may be, we can't find a new way of doing things which is totally unprecedented in terms of international history and international politics so far. To be very brief, the basic approach to a solution in Kashmir lies first in better India-Pakistan relations. You cannot make progress on Jammu and Kashmir without a better overall framework of understanding between India and Pakistan. And there is no way out of that except the hard grind of diplomacy and doing things which other countries have done to see that your relations have more stability, which means first and foremost, where India and Pakistan are concerned, you need to have diplomatic ties restored to a better level. You have now been in a situation for a fairly long period where you do not have ambassadors in each other's capitals. There is a total ban on trade. As I said, these are the low-hanging fruits, and you cannot reinvent the wheel and find a way out without attending to these simple, straightforward issues first, because whatever is the solution to Jammu and Kashmir, and maybe there are other solutions, maybe they lie buried in our files in terms of what was done between 2004 and 2008, but that solution can only be sustainable if it is embedded in a framework of better India-Pakistan relations. So I think that truth, if we accept as inescapable, then you realize that there is nothing else except the hard grind of diplomacy, which is there to guide you.
If I'm allowed to say
Finally, may I request our guest from Islamabad to give a parting constructive suggestion? Jan Lodi?
I just wanted to say a few words, if you allow. That was, okay, if UN resolutions, in your opinion, they are dead. What about Simla agreement? It said that you will not, none of the sides will change the status quo. What have we done about that? And as far as I agree, totally agree with Ambassador Raghavan once he said that we need to first, establish good relations. And for that, I have a suggestion that, as General Saab was saying, that what atrocities in Kashmir is more of a rhetoric and more of a propaganda. I suggest that a delegation from India should come to our part of Kashmir and see the situation there, and please allow our delegation to visit your part of Kashmir and see what is happening there, and then this propaganda will be over and we'll be on the same keel, and then we'll be able to talk. Thank you.
Yes. Parting suggestion, Ambassador Bassett? It's his left. No, he's there. Your parting words, Ambassador Bassett.
No, thank you very much for this very interesting, and I think very I learned a lot. But one thing which I would say is that which I have been saying all along, that in Pakistan we do have a great deal of interest in normalizing our relations with India. And we fully understand that how important this relationship is for two of us, and then for the entire region as a whole. Look where the South SARC as an organization has become totally dysfunctional, and it has become hostage to Pakistan-India hostility, unfortunately. So I think in Pakistan, sitting in Islamabad, my emphasis would be that India would do a great service to this region if it stops looking at Pakistan as if it's doing favor to Pakistan by talking to it or discussing with it the Kashmir dispute and so on and so forth. Peace is in our mutual interests. That should be the beginning point. It is not about India or Pakistan. It is in peace and stability is in our mutual interest. And if we start from this premise, I'm sure things will get better. And let's hope that the future posterity on both sides does not suffer as did our ancestors, or as we are going through this difficult phase in our bilateral relationship. So let's hope that things would get better in future, and our two countries would be able to live as normal neighbors and cooperating with each other and yielding benefits for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In my concluding remarks, I want to profusely apologize on behalf of my institution for these technical glitches, which were unexpected because we haven't encountered this kind of a problem. But we've been able to overcome this and ensure that at least this event, which was very important, we were able to go through it. And we are thankful to General Lodi and Ambassador Bassett, and I have a certain rapport with them that they kindly agreed to be with us, and we look forward for more such fruitful interaction. My thanks also to Professor Baru, who is the initiator of this idea for a debate of this kind, and to General Bhatia and Ambassador Raghavan, with whom again I have a very good personal rapport and institutional rapport. And I hope that we have many more such dialogues, because I want to tell your audience from Pakistan that in this hall we have serving officers from the three services, we have diplomats, and we have some members of strategic community. So it's not one of those, webinars where you talk to a set of people and it is, you listen with one ear and you take it out from another ear. So whatever you have said, a proper note of that has been taken here, and it would reach the highest policy level. And I'm sure whatever perception you've gathered from others, our side, these would be conveyed to the people who are at the helm of affairs. And thank you very much once again, and we look forward to
Thank you
such
very much.
interaction in
very
future as well.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you
It
very
was
much.
a
Good.
real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And my thanks to the audience here.